Tip number 1, keep your opponent in your lap. So a good example of this would be, I have her back, and let's say she starts to escape. I can start working to get to mounts because what I'm doing is keeping her in my lap. And another good example that's maybe not so obvious is I have her hips in my lap like this. Well, I can always start bringing her shoulders into my lap. So I could be here and start coming up higher, putting her shoulders in my lap for arm bars and triangles. It's that transition of her hips in my lap to her shoulders in my lap that creates different attacks. So again, I'm here, I have her hips in my lap. I could start working to attack with her shoulders in my lap, or I could keep her hips in my lap and start working to go for chokes and stuff like that. But no matter what happens, I need to keep her in my lap. I can't just let her start getting out and escaping. Tip number 2, prioritize a bottom hook. So we always need a bottom hook because the bottom hook is the side that they're going to try to escape to, because that's the way gravity works. She can't go up. It just doesn't work like that. She could start going to the side here, but what's happening is my top hook becomes my bottom hook, and she would need to get past that hook all the same. So we need to keep the bottom hook so that we keep them in our lap. If she starts to get past the bottom hook, I need to do something about it. So a couple things I can do. I can start bringing her to the other side so that my top hook becomes my bottom hook, and now I have a bottom hook. I could also do a chair sit back take. So she starts getting out, I can start pushing her onto her side, putting her back in my lap, and now again, my top hook becomes my bottom hook. Or again, she starts to get past the bottom hook, I need to keep her in my lap. I could just always go to mounts instead of keeping the back. Or again, she stays in my lap. Tip number 3, understand what the top hook does. So just because the bottom hook is important doesn't mean that the top hook is useless. So the bottom hook stops them from getting out of your lap this way, but the top hook stops them from turning this way. So if I have no top hook, she could potentially start turning and escaping and getting out of my lap, which would be no good. My top hook stops that. She tries to turn to her knees, right? I can stop her with my top hook. My top hook can be on the inside like this, which is pretty traditional, but I can also have my top hook on the outside, which oftentimes I actually prefer. So I can take my top hook and put it here. Now she starts to turn this way. It's very hard for her to do, and I can control her and keep her where I want her. I don't want her to turn to her knees. I want to keep her on her side like this. So again, I can have it on the inside, that's fine. Or I can keep my hook on the outside like this, either one. Tip number 4, flatten people out. So if she does get to her knees, I can flatten her out by driving my hips down. This is a great way to control someone. It's very hard for them to get out. Personally, I don't always use it because it can be kind of hard to get your arm in there for a choke and start, going for submissions. And you also have gravity working against you, but it's a very dominant way to control someone and very demoralizing for them. So it can be a good option, especially in MMA, where you can punch and really make their day really bad. Tip number 5, keep your chest centered. So for good back control, you have your chest centered on their back, and you have their hips in your lap. And when you lose those things, you start losing your ability to control them. So she starts turning her back, that's how she starts escaping. I don't want that. I want to make sure I'm as centered as possible at all times and prioritize that.
Quickly, this video is brought to you by Transparent Labs, my absolute favorite supplement brand. I love how they're all natural. Everything in the ingredient list looks like actual ingredients rather than a science project. Sponsored or not, I don't see myself ever switching to another brand because I take so seriously what I put into my body. Clean ingredients only. Go to transparentlabs.com and use code Jordan for 10% off your order if you want high quality and nutritious supplements.
Tip number 6, trap their arms with your hooks. So when I don't have their arms trapped, I have my arms against their arms, and it's 2-on-2. But if I can trap their arms with my hooks, I can make it their none against my one and make it a lot easier. It's hard to trap both, but it's a lot easier to get at least one. So the one that's easier to get is the top one. If I try to trap the bottom one, it's very hard to do. I don't have that mobility to make that happen. But the top one is much easier to get to. And once I have that, Well, now again, I can start attacking much easier. A great system to do that is the straitjacket, where you take their top arm with your bottom arm and their bottom arm with your top arm, and then now take your top hook over their top arm and pass it off, and pass off their bottom arm to your bottom arm. Very confusing, tongue twister, but I have a video that's all about the straitjacket system, so make sure you check that out. Tip number 7, don't let your opponent pin your shoulders. So Jiu-Jitsu is all about controlling shoulders and hips. So just like this, I have her hips, I have her shoulders. I don't want her to pin my shoulders to the mat. So she starts driving her weight into me like this and pinning my shoulders to the mat. Well, now it's very hard to do anything. It's hard to trap her to her arms with my hooks, hard to attack her, hard to go for any submissions. I don't want this to happen. I want to make sure that she's in my lap. Like I said before, again, in my lap. She starts driving into me. It's more so that she's on my lap. Now again, look how little my hooks control her now. I can't let this happen. I need to keep her down and don't let her control, or don't let her pin my shoulders to the mat. Tip number 8, beware of the ankle locks. So when you cross your feet and you have your feet in the middle of their legs like this, there's a risk of an ankle lock, but it doesn't mean that crossing your feet in general is bad. I'll cross my feet all the time if I'm to the side or if I'm kind of more in front of her, but I don't want to have my feet crossed dangling in the middle like this, because she can go for an ankle lock and then that's not very good for me. So if she were to do that, one thing you can do is you can start pushing them forward, because now they can't extend. She needs to extend her body like this to get that breaking power. If I push her forward, she goes forward, I push her forward like this, I can help mitigate that risk. But either way, I don't want to have to deal with that. So I don't want to put my feet in the middle crossed, but again, you can have your feet off to the side crossed and the risk is extremely minimal. I cross my feet all the time. I don't worry about it because again, I don't put my feet like this. I cross my feet elsewhere. If you want more concepts like this, go to jujitsutheorycourse.com and pick up my Jiu-Jitsu theory course. And make sure to sign up for my newsletter for free Jiu-Jitsu tips every single week.